After the fall of Mussolini's regime and the devastation of World War II, Italian filmmakers found themselves in a ravaged landscape, both physically and culturally. In response, a new cinematic movement emerged, Italian neorealism. It rejected glossy studio productions in favour of real locations, non-professional actors, and stories rooted in the everyday struggles of ordinary people. Among its pioneers was Vittorio De Sica, an actor turned director who believed that cinema would be a tool of empathy and social critique. De Sica collaborated closely with screenwriter Cesare Zavattini, the intellectual engine behind neorealism, who championed the idea that extraordinary can exist in the ordinary. Zavattini adapted Bicycle Thieves from a 1946 novel by Luigi Bartoloni, although he retained only the premise: a man whose bicycle is stolen and then explores the town with his son trying to find the culprit, and radically changed the tone and focus. Bartolini's book was satirical and bitter. Zavattini and De Sica turned it into a deeply humane exploration of dignity, poverty, and desperation. And true to neorealist principles, De Sica refused to cast professional actors. Lamberto Margiorani was a factory worker with no acting experience. He didn't even audition, he visited the set for his son to play the character's son in the movie, but De Sica then picked him as the lead, Antonio, for his weathered face and natural humility. He later admitted that he cast Margiorani not because he was a great actor, but because he was the character. In fact, the female lead for the movie, she was merely a journalist who had approached De Sica for an interview, and she ended up getting the part. However, De Sica's casting methods did cause some problems. Margiorani was extremely shy and embarrassed due to his lack of training, and became extremely anxious when he wasn't able to do what the director required him to. However, this didn't bother the director in the slightest, as he felt this anxiety and nervousness would communicate well on camera for the role. Clever, it worked! The way he moved, the way he sat down, his gestures with his hands hardened from work, the hands of a working man, not of an actor, and made him promise that after the film he would forget the cinema and would go back to his job. Bloody liar. After the film, Margiorani returned to factory work but was laid off, ironically because the factory thought that he'd become wealthy from the film, but he never found sustained success in acting afterwards. Production started without even casting Antonio's son Bruno, but director De Sica spotted 8-year-old Enzo Staiola watching the filming and was captivated by his expressive face and streetwise manner. In fact, there's a scene where it starts raining, but this was actually provided by the Roman fire department. The director would shoot with 6 different cameras at the same time to try to capture the untrained actor's spontaneous reactions to certain things. Not a bad idea, but this method did cause them to go over budget quite a bit. Also, the kid playing Bruno was nearly hit by a car twice, and this was totally unplanned. It was a genuine mistake as 2 drivers passed by at the exact same time. He was cast as Antonio's son, and his performance became a cornerstone of the film's emotional weight. In fact, De Sica took time to build a real bond with Enzo, rehearsing with him informally to bring out natural responses rather than taut lines. The film was shot entirely on location in Rome, which was still riddled with poverty, rubble, and rebuilding after the war. This setting wasn't a backdrop, it was an entire character. With a limited budget, De Sica had to be resourceful. He used natural lighting and shot with a small crew, often using hidden cameras to capture unfiltered street life. Much of the dialogue was loosely scripted or improvised. Scenes were rehearsed but allowed to unfold organically to capture realism. The titular bicycle was not a symbol of freedom or adventure, but of survival. In the story, it's essential for Antonio's new job as a poster hanger, and its theft threatens his family's fragile existence. The film opens in post-war Rome, where Antonio Ricci, an unemployed man, finally secures a job but needs a bicycle to do it. His wife pawns their bed sheets so he can reclaim his bicycle from the pawn shop, but on his first day of work, the bicycle is stolen. Antonio and his young son Bruno scour the city in search of the thief. As the search grows more desperate, Antonio becomes increasingly unhinged, eventually attempting to steal a bicycle himself, only to be caught. In the final scene, father and son walk home together, broken, hand in hand. This final image, simple yet devastating, has been called one of the most powerful in movie history. Bicycle Thieves premiered in Italy in 1948, earning critical acclaim but modest box office returns. The film also faced censorship, as there was originally a scene of a small boy urinating against a wall which was cut for the American release, causing outrage in Italy, who apparently love seeing little boys piss. Originally, it received negative reviews in its home country, as many Italians felt like it portrayed their culture in a negative way. Even the author of the original novel wasn't a fan, believing that the changes made by the movie betrayed the source material, where Antonio was an intellectual middle-class man, and the story was about the breakdown of civil order, which he felt wasn't portrayed properly in the film. However, it was internationally that the film truly took off. In 1949, it won an Academy Honorary Award before the Best Foreign Language Film category existed. It also won Best Foreign Film in the 1950 BAFTAs and the Golden Lion nomination at Venice. However, once it was re-released again in the 1990s, reviews became a lot more positive, many praising its dark and uncompromising depiction of post-war life, and it now has a huge cult following that remains today, being listed on eBook's Greatest Movies, as well as being one of the favourites of iconic director Akira Kurosawa. In the United States, it became a sensation sensation among film critics and intellectuals. American critic Bosley Crowther called it the most touching and effective picture of the year. In fact, Sight and Sound ranked it as the greatest movie of all time, and it would reach the top 10 repeatedly in the decades that followed. It influenced filmmakers like Martin Scorsese, Satyajit Ray, Ken Roach, and Abbas Kiarostami. The film was often cited as the purest expression of cinematic humanism, with its focus on empathy over plot, realism over spectacle. Antonio's descent from hopeful worker to attempted thief encapsulates the moral compromises poverty imposes. At the heart of the film is Bruno, a child forced to witness the crumbling of his father's pride. Their bond elevates the film from social realism to profound emotional resonance. The title is plural because by the end, Antonio too becomes one. Over time, however, the title was incorrectly translated to just The Bicycle Thief. This was actually down to a review in the New York Times accidentally calling it that, so this name was spread around in error, but it just doesn't make sense. It's like calling it The Avenger. The film implicates society itself in a world where survival means sacrifice. The final shot of Antonio and Bruno disappearing into a crowd inspired countless cinematic homages, from The 400 Blows to Roma. Bicycle Thief endures because of its emotional clarity, socio-political insight, and unflinching realism. It is a film that doesn't try to entertain so much as it tries to tell a simple, painful truth. That in a world of inequality and hardship, dignity is fragile and precious. But the biggest issue with the movie is its complete disregard for spoilers. Dude, didn't you see the title? Although there is some funny foreshadowing.
Vedi Ricci, per fare sto mestiere ci vuole molta intelligenza. Ci vuole occhi e smettete.
When the bike gets stolen, it is quite amusing because this creepy ass guy clearly looks like the thief. He walks towards the camera like he's Satan, so you're expecting him to be the criminal, but no, he doesn't even do anything. Someone else nicks it. And I shouldn't laugh, but he jumps on the side of a car and demands they follow the cyclist as if they shot his damn mother. Yeah, for the whole film he's stressing about this bike, whereas nobody else seems to think that it's that big a deal.
Novità, brigadiere? No, niente, una bicicletta.
But to be honest, Antonio has nothing else. Without the bike, he can't support his family, so it makes sense that it's, excuse the pun, ride or die when it comes to this silly little bicycle. Although these are some of the worst criminals ever, they couldn't act more suspicious if they tried.
Sì, vabbè, ma devo guardare solo il numero della matricola.
E che ci fai col numero della matricola? No, non si compra il numero, ma va a vedere il numero del telaio. E se io lo voglio far vedere?
Boh, vado a chiamare la guardia e poi vedremo.
E va a chiamare chi te pare, va.
They may as well have kleptomaniac tattooed on their heads. There are some pretty great shots as they drive through England. He thinks he spots the thief and then it becomes a case of Antonio running around trying to find a small child, which is very odd. He ends up practically abducting this old man in church in front of everybody and nobody bats an eye, they just let it happen. Although Antonio doesn't come across as a very good father.
Non sarebbe la stata nappia, minestra.
E state zitta pure te. Andiamo, muovete. Ma guarda che razza di ragazzina, andiamo.
Perché mi avete dato?
Perché te lo meritavi.
But due to the circumstances, it is understandable considering his stress and frustration. Besides, it could be worse. He could be Harry Potter. Oh, we'll get to that next month.
Non pensiamo a niente. Ci ubriachiamo, va.
Damn, I wish I had a dad like him. Okay, I take back my previous comment. It turns out the entire townsfolk are into this dastardly scheme of stealing a bicycle, but you can't help but feel sorry for Antonio. He gets called paranoid and nobody believes him, or everyone roots for the crooks. And fair play for its daring humour.
Che c'era ricco c'è il mio figlio, e il mio figlio è incensurato. Tutti lo conoscono qua, tutti lo fanno testimoniare.
Dice che c'ha il cappello da tedesco.
Although sometimes the dialogue doesn't make a lot of sense.
Sarebbe querela per diffamazione.
Che volete da quel ragazzo che non ha fatto mai male alla mosca?
He's not accusing him of hurting anyone though.
Dorme qua. Guardate sotto al letto se ci sono le biciclette. Qui c'è sta mia figlia, un'altra ragazzina e io. Oh.
Do criminals normally hide their stolen goods under their beds? I do think the end of the film is really rushed, but you still have a lot of sympathy for the guy as there's no witnesses to this most heinous crime, and everyone is backing up the criminals instead. The performance is great, especially from an untrained actor, as he tries to explain to the police how much the sodding bike means to him. It becomes so tragic as he is so desperate at this point he resorts to stealing a bike himself. It's heartbreaking to see him stoop to such a low level, and after everyone can somehow catch up to him on foot, he gets arrested but let go. This is all incredibly rushed and I feel could have been given a further 10 minutes or so to let it all breathe. But it is certainly a okay, depressing but powerful ending. He and his son walk the streets completely ashamed of what's happened. It was meant to be an homage to the works of De Sica's favourite director, Charlie Chaplin, and it is so mesmerising. Margiorani also confirmed that while he was uncomfortable acting, he began to merge the character into his own identity as he resonated with him so much, and it really works so well. It's a touching film with a tremendous lead performance, and although on the surface a bit of a silly and simple premise, it does leave you wondering, what levels would you stoop to in order to provide for your family? Bicycle Thieves is a decent flick, and I would honestly recommend you check it out. Today, over 75 years after its release, Bicycle Thieves remains a towering achievement. It is cinema paired to its essence, true truth, compassion, and the quiet nobility of the ordinary. Both physically and culturally. Both physically and culturally. Why can't I say culturally?